Well, welcome to the High Vibration Living Podcast, Dr. Geller.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
So, I'm excited to talk with you about the connection of hormones, diet, and endocrine disruptors. And I think it's really exciting to talk about this because I'm sure you're dealing with a lot of clients that feel like they're doing all the things, but they aren't getting the physical and maybe sometimes emotional adjustments that they want from their body.
That's kind of what got me really interested in endocrine disruptors, to be honest with you. I would see a lot of patients coming in who had all these symptoms like unexplained fatigue or weight gain or hormone, menstrual abnormalities. And we check their hormones every way we can, and they would come out normal.
Yeah.
And it opened the idea that there must be something else in our body that's, mimicking hormones or blocking hormones. And that's exactly what endocrine disruptors do. You can kind of think of them as like hormones. They're just sinister and they're not easily detected.
So it's so interesting. I literally just had a bunch of blood work done, and I'm 43 years old, and all my hormones came up balanced and healthy, but there seemed to be in my blood work tons of sign of inflammation. And I myself am carrying extra weight and have tons of inflammation in my body, and I can't seem to get to the root cause. And as a health supportive chef, I think I'm doing all the things and I'm living, a clean, healthy lifestyle, and the blood work isn't telling me where the blocks are.
Right.
How do you start working with clients when they feel like they've tried it all and they don't know where to pivot or turn?
Well, I mean, the first thing is like what some people consider of trying it all is different for different people. So, I have a Western and sort of for lack of a better term, Eastern approach to my clients and my patients. And it's a really cast a wide net, right? I want to make sure first and foremost that nothing serious medical is going on. And so I will cast a wide net and sit and talk to my patients for, a good amount of time, asking a lot of questions that may seem like they have nothing to do with the issue at hand, but really there's a reason I'm asking about, sleep and stress and gut and diet, everything, no matter what they're seeing me for. So we cast a wide net and we try to look for everything we can. And at the end of the day, as far as feeling good, not everybody's going to feel good all the time. And that's a harsh sort of thing to say. But I feel like our expectations are sometimes greater than they should be in this day and age. There's so much pressure, there's so much social media, and my patient's perception of wellness and health. Sometimes we just need to reframe it. There was a great book that I recommend to a lot of my patients by Dr. Julie Holland called Moody Bitches. I don't know if you've heard of it, but
No.
it's all about female hormone health. And one of the things she talks about in there is, it's a cycle, and there's going to be times where you feel good and there's times where you don't feel good. And, it's sort of a Buddhist approach to our health, but I think it's important because we don't always feel happy. We don't always feel great when we look in the mirror, and we don't always feel good about ourselves. And that's okay. I think people need to recognize that. Now, of course, if it's chronic and ongoing and someone feels like crap and there's really signs of a disease, they need to keep digging. I agree.
That's good to know. Well, when we want to keep digging, I think there's two directions we can go. And you can let me know if there's more, but it seems like it's endocrinologists or functional medicine doctors. How do we know which one to turn to? What do they actually do?
Right. So, an endocrinologist, a medical doctor, gone to medical school, done a residency in internal medicine to get a real broad base of training. And then we do another, at least 2-3 years of postdoctoral fellowship. So, we're looking at medical diseases, medical diagnoses, ruling out diseases in the adrenal glands or the thyroid or the pituitary glands. We're looking for autoimmune conditions in those glands and, real severe stuff, and prescribing medication, when that's appropriate. But, personally, I try to take a little more of an integrative view with my clients. It's certainly initially, I always try to find an opportunity to do something natural, whether it's their, something with their lifestyle, their stress, their diet, their sleep, supplements. And that's what functional medicine practitioners do. By and large, they look at alternative diagnoses, or they use alternative testing. They may look at genomics or genetic testing, unconventional stool testing and things like that, which, I don't do. So there's a role for both, people at the table. Functional medicine practitioners, rely heavily on supplements because they cannot typically prescribe medications. Thankfully, I can do both. And, I really enjoy using supplements with my patients when they're, supported by evidence and they work, because there's a real aversion to taking medication these days.
When you do have to subscribe medication, what are the type of medications that support your clients with these issues?
Well, it really varies. So if it's, a thyroid imbalance and we've done everything we could with their nutrition or supplements and their lifestyle, but their thyroid is still out of balance, then it would be, thyroid hormone, for example. If it's diabetes and they've really maxed out what they can do with their diet and their exercise and same sort of protocol, we may need to put them on, a medication to improve their insulin sensitivity, like metformin or something to help excrete extra glucose in the urine or whatever. There's so many unique features to everybody's case. Um, but again, for every condition I see, I'm not like a typical endocrinologist. The typical endocrinologist starts with the prescription pad, and that's pretty much where it ends. I really try to factor in a change in lifestyle, whether I'm seeing someone with osteoporosis, which is an endocrine condition because the hormones affect our bones. We talk a lot about nutrition and protein and lifestyle and fracture prevention and balance and vision and so many things that go into, bone health that we don't think about. A diabetic patient, again, we talk a lot about mindfulness eating and just kind of reframing your relationship with food and, concepts like that, not just take this drug or take a shot. So that's the protocol I use with everybody and, it works really well.
And when you're talking to clients and you think that it's endocrine disruptors that are a main root of their inflammation or their hormone imbalance, what does that mean and where do you start with them?
So I start, by just educating my patients and telling them, look, this is what an endocrine disruptor means. It's just a chemical in our body that can be mimicking or blocking a hormone. And I often use this analogy of like a key and a lock. Like the hormones works like a key going into a lock. And if there's something in there, you can't get the key in, basically. And so I start educating them and I explain common endocrine disruptors that we can all relate to, like BPA in plastic water bottles is sort of like the poster child. And I explain why that's bad and how it can affect, thyroid signaling. And, it literally causes fat cells to multiply when we study it in laboratory settings. And so I start with an easy example. Like everybody knows plastic and plastic water bottles are unsafe. And, I'll explain other areas in the home that we may be exposed to endocrine disruptors like nonstick cookware, pesticides. And I realize not everybody can eat organic foods and food's expensive. But I try to encourage people, look, at least with like fruits and veggies, the things that have the highest exposure of pesticides, that's an important. So I go through real world examples, not to scare them, but to really kind of survey your life and what can we do, to eliminate this stuff.
Yeah, a lot of people buy pots and pans that are just convenient, the ones that they just see at Target. They don't take the time to research what their pots and pans are made out of, maybe how long they've had them, and if it's time to let them go. It's really interesting as a chef and someone that goes into a lot of people's homes to cook health supportive meals. A lot of people haven't taken the time to purchase great equipment, and that's often why they're getting so frustrated cooking because they don't have the tools that make it easy and make it fun, but then the tools that they purchase are also affecting their health.
Right.
Do
Right.
you find that when you talk to them in a doctor's office that you're coming across the same thing?
Yeah. I mean, I think my patients often think they're making good decisions. Like your clients are, hey, I went and bought this, appliance so I could eat healthier, not realizing it was toxic. And I find, so many products out there have different labels on them, different claims, health claims. Protein bars are a good example. Like so many of them are full of processed crap. I always encourage people to really learn to read labels. We need to do that, not just with our foods, but with the skincare products too, is another huge area that, my clients are interested in learning about because it's a huge source of endocrine disruptors. So now we need to learn to read those labels too, just like a food label.
Yeah, if I could go back in time and not freeze water bottles before sporting events and workouts and be more mindful of the lotions and oils that I put all over my body, I think maybe your clientele would be different because so many of us spent, 20 years doing that. So I'm assuming
Right.
that builds up over a slow period of time. And what you're often treating is not what we did yesterday, but what we did 10 years ago.
Exactly. Exactly. And, it's frustrating, but we do the best we can. But, you're right. And the stuff it literally stores in our body. It stores in our fat cells, these endocrine disruptors. And it's not a dose response curve. They get leaked out slowly, over the years. And it's really an issue.
So how do we leak it out?
Well, the body just, they literally, as it gets stored in fat cells or in the liver, different organs, they get released, and that's why some people may have been exposed to endocrine disruptors years ago, but not have symptoms of it till much later in life, whether it's autoimmunity or fertility problems or other hormone imbalances. There's really no evidence-based like supplement or anything to really extract these things out of our system and clean. This is the question I get all the time. Well, how do I get these out of my system? And there's been some studies trying to look at that, but there's really nothing proven yet that does that.
It's just like a slow lifestyle change.
Yeah, you're basically trying to put less back into your system is the best we can do, and whatever's in our body. I mean, hopefully it doesn't cause something bad to happen.
When you're working with clients who are having hormone issues, so too much estrogen, not enough estrogen, too much testosterone, not enough testosterone, are there foods that you recommend that they eat to balance their hormones?
There are foods, in general, just to take a step back from specific foods, like the importance of nutrition in our hormones cannot be really overstated enough. It's so important. And the way to look at it is, hormones are really like kind of a luxury from an evolutionary standpoint. We don't have to have many of them to live. We need them to live well. And if we're nutritionally not optimal, the body will turn down the production of our hormones in order to conserve resources and prevent us from reproducing. It's just a straight evolutionary line. If we're eating like crap or we're undernourished, very often estrogen will go down in women, testosterone will go down in men. And so I always start, with that kind of explanation at a higher level. But there are specific foods that we think can sort of support, to use a word in quotes, our hormones. There's no, again, like randomized trials, but for example, with estrogens, we know that, flaxseed and soy products and certain legumes and things are supportive of estrogen metabolism. Similarly, there's certain things that may help excrete excess estrogen because too much estrogen can build up in the body. That's not good. Broccoli is a great example, and there's a supplement called DIM, that's derived from a component of broccoli that's really helpful to excrete excess estrogen. For progesterone, we think vitamin B6, magnesium, zinc are good sources that may help support, progesterone. We know that the body needs those things to make progesterone, and so those are supportive. In general, omegas, protein intake, just good, healthy nourishment will go a long way towards nourishing our hormones.
What about testosterone? Because I feel like that's the big talk that I've been slowly hearing about it for, I think, 5-6 years, is just men having a lot of problem with their testosterone levels.
Yeah.
And then a lot of men in their 30s wanting to start early to take natural supplements to make sure that they don't have that dip. Is there something that they can just focus on food-wise, or is it really always a supplement issue?
I mean, I've seen it improve with again, the worse somebody's diet is to begin with, the better the improvement they're going to have. If someone's really eating toxic, poor foods and they're overweight, cleaning up their diet, exercising, losing weight in a healthy way will improve a man's testosterone often. A lot of the supplements out there that claim to help testosterone, even some that have been tested and randomized, I've really not found to be that effective, to be honest with you. I really don't think there's a great supplement out there. But the issue of men taking testosterone is important because I get this question every day in my office, like guys in their 20s or 30s. And what people need to realize is that in general, when you take a hormone, your body stops making its own. So if a guy has a testosterone of, say, 400 and he wants to get it to 600, taking testosterone, it doesn't add on to his own 400. It just resets the clock, basically. It will suppress your own body from making it. And become dependent upon it can also cause other side effects in men. It can cause low sperm count and infertility, and testicles can atrophy and hair loss on your head. So it's, I never advocate that unless somebody truly has low testosterone. If they have a disease or condition, of course it should be replaced. But the supplementing has really gotten out of control, and it's unfortunate because a lot of times this stuff's not reversible.
For some people, it's just so much easier than having to make a change in your lifestyle or your food choices. But I feel like if we can all learn to make little edits in our lifestyle and food choices, it'll move us towards getting the results we want faster and more long term.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's what we're looking for. It's a lifestyle. It's not a diet.
Absolutely. What happens when a client comes to you because they've gotten a diagnosis about something in regards to their health or their hormones? And do you find most people come to you because they've gotten a diagnosis or because they're still looking for answers?
I mean, both. A lot of times people come to me with a diagnosis, and the first thing I have to do, as a consulting physician is confirm that. Is it the right diagnosis? Was the hormone tested the right way? Was it tested the right time of day or the right time of month? Was there some interfering substance, some reason why the test may not have been accurate? Do I trust the lab where it was done? There's so much detective work that I'm going to do because somebody, once they have a diagnosis, it's something they carry with them forever, and you really want to make sure that that's proper and correct. People get really upset and anxious thinking they have a condition they don't. So, those are all the first steps that I do when someone comes to me.
I really love that doctors are being more mindful of the diagnosis that they give people. And, this is called the High Vibration Living Podcast. So I talk to doctors and I talk to practitioners in a variety of fields, even astrologers. And astrologers are now talking about that they're being more mindful of like what they're saying to their clients when they read their charts, because they can tell somebody something that they interpret, and they can carry that myth forever as truth, and it
Right.
really can affect the outcome of their lives.
And it can get passed down, right? I mean, they tell their kids about something, whether it's something spiritual or something medical, and it becomes ingrained.
Yeah.
I've had patients too, I also take a detailed family history. It's really important. It's better than any genetic test. And it's amazing what people find out about their family history when they ask their siblings or parents or grandparents, or what truths they uncover that were incorrect.
Yeah, what are some things that we should be asking our family members about the history of our health?
I think some real key, obviously, cancer is a big one because there's strong genetic risks for cancer. Autoimmunity is important because very, very common when someone has Hashimoto's or type 1 diabetes or some autoimmune condition, somebody somewhere in the family has autoimmunity. And it's good to know because we can screen for it early before somebody gets a disorder. Diabetes, of course, is really important. Coronary artery disease is huge, very important. Such a strong genetic basis for that. And, I always tell my patients, we inherit a genetic risk for disease. You don't inherit the disease. So just having the genetics or a family history doesn't mean you're destined to get it. And I always say, don't be victimized by your genetics.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Be aware, but don't marry it for sure.
Yeah, of course.
All right. So for those that are entering their 40s or that are in their 40s, men and women, I think the number one thing is everyone starts to have weight problems. And I think at this point, because we're all used to the noise on social media, we're wondering, is it hormones? Is it endocrine disruptors? Is it my adrenals? Is it my age? How do you start addressing weight loss with clients once they've hit their 40s?
Well, I always tell my patients, we need to be thinking like a decade ahead of our biology. And that goes even before the 40s. So thinking ahead in that term, menopause. Okay, menopause starts typically around 50 or so for women. I look at that decade before as like you're trying to build up reserve. Women are trying to build up reserve. And I tell them, menopause can be like a 10 out of 10 in severity or a 2 out of 10, depending on what you go in, what are you bringing with you to that phase of your life.
Yeah.
So it's really like we're training. And same thing with men, like men's hormones start to go down as well, although it's slower than women. It's not as abrupt as in menopause, but men go through something called andropause, and testosterone starts to decline probably about 1% or so a year after age 40. So, building up a lot of reserve to me is not, of course, the diet, nutrition is a huge part of it, but, our sleep, how we manage stress, our leisure time, our diet, supplements, every box needs to be checked
Okay.
to build up that tank of reserve. The biggest, if I had to think of one common problem that I see amongst patients in that age group, it's alcohol. I mean, I think people really underestimate the effects that even small but cumulative amounts of alcohol have on their metabolism, their weight. It just creeps up, and we've all seen it. And I think it's a big issue out there.
Well, it's interesting because that's kind of the number one reason why I quit drinking in my early 30s. And I really stopped at 30, 31, just because I didn't like how it caused me to gain a lot of weight. And so I constantly felt like I was on this roller coaster where I'd be super social, I'd have a few drinks, and then I would have to stop drinking for a few weeks just so I could, fit back into my clothes.
Yeah.
And I just didn't like the feeling and I didn't like the lifestyle and I wanted consistency. So I stopped drinking before it was a fad and I would just show up at dinners and bars and restaurants, and I would just order water. And I'm grateful that I did that. Hopefully, it's going to make moving to the next decade of my life a little more smooth. But there are still a lot of people that are really married to having a drink as a way to release stress or to create inner peace or time for themselves. When you have clients that are still married to having drinks every day, are there activities or tools that you're able to share with them to make that lifestyle edit?
Well, first of all, one thing I tell them is, look, if we try this for a period of time, say, a few months, enough time that we'll see some changes in their quality of life. I'm like, if you try it and you're feeling worse or not, you can always go back. You can always
Yeah.
go back to drinking if you think that's good for you and you feel better. And most people don't want to. But it's hard with if it depends why they're drinking. Like if it's stress, like of course go out and exercise or take some ashwagandha, meditate. There's 1,000 things you can do to manage stress.
Yeah.
I can have stressful days here at work and I don't open a bottle of alcohol. So there's certainly better ways to manage stress. If it's a social thing, like you're describing, a lot of my patients say, "Oh, but I go to dinner and I go out." But you can have a bubbly water and a lime or something else to
Hmm.
kind of give you that tactile sensation. If somebody's embarrassed that they feel peer pressure, and which I see in adults, in their
Yeah.
50s who will acknowledge that to me, well, that's something deeper that they need to work on. But I guess, you want to find out why a lot of people think that what they're drinking is healthy or it's, low calorie or it's not, and I explain again, always go back to the science. I like to educate. It's the best way to empower my patients, right? So I'll say, well, it's not just about the calories. Here's what alcohol does to your pancreas and it affects your insulin and your blood sugar metabolism. Here's what it does to your brain. Here's what it does to your heart. And, just try to paint a bigger picture. Alcohol is associated with osteoporosis. And I've seen young men literally with spines of like an 80-year-old patient from osteoporosis because of alcoholism. So I try to just educate, and usually that's the best way to help somebody make a change. And tell them also, look, I'm not telling you don't ever drink again. You can enjoy it. It's just like I don't want people to not eat dessert or whatever. You just don't want it to be kind of maladaptive to the point where it's causing you to have to be in my office.
What testing should we be doing to make sure that we're setting ourselves up for success 10 years from now, like you said?
Identifying things early. So, for example, let's use diabetes as an example. We can identify diabetes not only at the pre-diabetes state, but even like pre-diabetes or before. So, starting with the family history, knowing your genetics. Okay, am I susceptible to that? Using something like a continuous glucose meter, which anybody can get now, track their blood sugars and correlate their blood sugar spikes with food. We can measure a fasting insulin level and a blood sugar and look for insulin resistance before even prediabetes occurs. And we could check for pre. So there's a whole spectrum of testing that we can do before a disease state ever appears. Similarly with thyroid, if somebody has a family history of Hashimoto's, which more often than not is in women in the family, by the way, it can be in men, but it's much more common in women. So we can check for autoimmune markers of thyroid, or we can check the thyroid hormone levels over time and start getting data points and seeing, is your thyroid changing, are things going down? So again, for each of these diseases, we want to be a decade ahead of the biology. It's a really good rule of thumb that I try to follow. And to get back to the other question you said about weight, specifically,
Yeah.
what can people do? It's not that we can't lose weight in our 50s or later. It's just that the metabolism does slow. That's biology. Our metabolism slows. And I think of that as our underlying subsidy. So it's harder to lose weight. Yes, doesn't mean it can't be done, but that's why you don't want to go into that decade with all this baggage. You want to be prepared and have a lot of reserve. So, high protein diets I advocate, strength training, cardio, all the basic stuff that we all know that tried and true that works. But it is much harder to deal with it if you've already gone into a hormonal change.
Yeah, that's a really good reminder that we need to clear our baggage now when we see it and recognize it
Yep.
instead of hold on to it and think we'll deal with it later because it's just going to get harder.
It just gets harder and harder and it just accumulates.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm sure it doesn't, as it accumulates, then it's going to be harder to uncover the root cause and which thing to address first.
One of my favorite patients said to me, and you might need to bleep this, but he said, deal with your shit or your shit will deal with you. And it's just so, and he was talking about emotional health, but it really
Yeah.
applies to, everything about our health. We're just kicking the can down the road. It doesn't help.
Yeah. When your clients come in, I'm curious, how often do you think how often is it food and how often is it emotional baggage?
I think it's more often emotional than food,
Yeah.
but the two are connected, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
like so much of weight management. If I have somebody who's struggling with weight issues, like we talk about, I mean, I'm not a therapist, but I do expose them to the concepts of, mindfulness eating and our relationship with food and kind of why are you eating? I mean, none of us eat just purely for nutritional purposes in this era where it's social, and I get that, but I talk to them about simple habits like, are you eating at your desk? Are you eating at work? Are you eating out of a bag, box, or a can? Like just simple things, just try to get them to realize, why they're doing what they're doing. Um, I think it's really important for patients to be open and honest with their doctor or their whoever they're seeing, whether it's a functional medicine doctor or a medical doctor, because that's another problem. If someone's not being open and honest, we can't really help them.
Should we, as patients, start to put together a food log before we go in and see a doctor?
That's a great idea. I love that idea. Yes. And actually, not many people do that I can think of. I also love using the continuous glucose meters with a food journal. It's a real eye opener for my patients to see, wow, I ate, bowl of white rice and here's what it did to my blood sugar, versus a handful of almonds or something. So I think journaling, again, it really opens up a mirror in front of us and a lot of insight data.
If we were to put together a little food journal before we went to our doctor's appointment, would you want to see 3 days? Would you want to see 1 week? What is the amount you're looking for?
I mean, I would say a week would be a good, sort of like a table someone can make Monday through Sunday and, the 3 meals a day, make a chart. So we have a good representation of what a normal week looks like.
Can you
And
tell us a little bit about how you like eating this time of year? Like, what have you found that really nourishes you and fuels you through your day or makes you feel grounded at the end of the day?
yeah, I mean, I eat pretty consistent all throughout the year and throughout the weeks, I mean, morning, I typically will have a lot of protein, eggs, Greek yogurt, nuts, um, seeds like hemp seeds, chia seeds, and a piece of fruit. And then during the day, I eat protein, well, majority of my diet. So I'll have like turkey slices, nut butters, some cottage cheese, things like that. I kind of graze all day long. It's sort of my style. I don't take up lunch hour, that kind of thing. But, I eat organic foods mainly. I eat unprocessed foods, drink a lot of water, and it seems to work for me. But I know, dieting and, it's so specific, it's so unique what works for some people. I have a lot of patients who are doing intermittent fasting, and I do recommend that to a lot of people who want to lose weight because it makes sense sort of biologically why it works for a lot of people, and they sort of sleep through half of it anyways. And, I found that to be really effective for a lot of my patients. Some people like to do keto, which is pretty extreme. I haven't found that to be sustainable for most people. But a lot of times I'll say, well, you can do keto to like lose your 20 pounds and then maybe maintain it with an intermittent fasting protocol or some version of that. But for me personally, I just like to kind of graze all day.
Where do you turn to keep learning and keep, not just learning as a medical practitioner, but also as a person where you keep evolving and gaining insights for your own kind of physical, emotional, spiritual, and mental health?
I read a lot. I mean, I read a lot of books and I read a lot of books, not just about medical stuff, but, I research for the medical part of my brain. I'm constantly researching the latest literature in PubMed, which is where our medical journals are published. Um, I learn a lot from my patients too. My mentor taught me that, and that's been really important. So if I have a patient who comes in and they're taking some supplement I've never heard of, but they're raving about it, I'll look it up and I'll say, what's the research behind it? Wow, this sounds really cool. I've not heard about this before. And, I want to be confident that something is at least moderately effective and safe, of course, before I would recommend it to someone else. I read there's all sorts of medical journals and, medical sites. I also listen to podcasts of people that I respect and just try to expose myself to as much information. But I think it's really important that we have a filter to know how to like filter out what's BS and what's not applicable to the conditions of the people that we're seeing.
What podcast do you like listening to right now?
I love Andrew Huberman. I've been listening to him for
Yeah.
a long time, but he's probably my favorite because he does what he says he does, and that is takes all this information and drills it down to a level, that we can all use. So he's definitely my top.
And you're also in Los Angeles and you get to spend time on the East Coast too. So I feel like you're in places where you have great access to constantly seeing what the health and wellness and spiritual trends are.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's out here in LA, it's definitely way more on the spiritual side at times, depending on who you're seeing or what it's for. Um, New York has a little more of a sophistication. I love each population I treat. It's a little bit different. And I like that. It's fun and it's different. But I like working with patients who really want to help themselves and who are in this for the long haul. Like if someone's coming to me and they want a quick fix, like that's not my thing. I'm not just gonna like juice you up with hormones and send you out the door. That's not what I do here. I'm looking for like long-term changes and helping patients really like take the ball and run with it, so they don't have to be on. The most gratifying thing to me is when somebody gets off of a medicine or doesn't have to take a medicine. So maybe it's not a great business practice, but it's a great feeling, and patients are really happy about that too. So I try to strive for that, but it doesn't always happen.
I think there's actually a large portion of the population around my age that want to see their parents, cut back on all the medications that they're taking. That, there's a lot of people in their 60s and 70s and 80s that have gotten to the space where they all have over 5, 6, 7 prescriptions that they're taking every day. If we can't eliminate them all, maybe we can at least cut them in half. How do we find a doctor, our parents to work with that will help them re-look at what they're taking and maybe slowly edit their lifestyle so they can remove some of them?
I'm so glad you asked me that question and I didn't expect it. So I'm not prepared for it, but I'm going to tell you, this is a problem. I do see it. I have elderly patients who come in and someone refers them to me and I look at their meds and there's like a dozen different medications. And right away I'm seeing, well, this could interact with this one and this one's not safe with you. And what is anybody monitoring your kidney function? And there's so much to think about. Doctors just write prescriptions like candy. It's like going to Halloween. Each house is a different doctor giving out a piece of candy. And next thing you know, somebody's on this long list and nobody's overseeing it. It's a problem. And there's literally a diagnostic term for it called polypharmacy, which just means too many drugs. So, and the problem also is, prior generations than ours, this is what the doctors did. And so, your parents or people's parents' doctors are probably their same age and grew up, many of them have a physician-patient relationship for decades. So we're not going to be able to change that doctor's mindset that easily either. But what I recommend people do with their parents, a really, really great resource that is often untapped is pharmacists. The very people that are prescribing all this stuff are actually in a great position to help thin out the list or look at potential interactions. It's unbelievable. And there's software now that anybody can take your list of medications and plug it into software and the computer will tell us potential drug interactions. And it's amazing how often this occurs. So pharmacists are a great resource. Now, this may not happen at the typical big box pharmacy where they're not going to take time, but if it's a smaller mom and pop pharmacy, I'd recommend people go in there with their parents or at least their parents' medication list. Another recommendation is to schedule a visit with the doctor with just specifically to talk about this. So it's not like you've had your 15-minute visit and on the way out you go, oh, by the way, can we go through all this? The doctor's not going to spend the time. I would, but most people won't. So I recommend people schedule a dedicated appointment with the physician just to go over the med list. And very often we can read out a few things at least, easily. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I love that. I think a lot of people are thinking about that, but they don't know where to start. So thank you for
Yeah.
those recommendations.
Yeah, of course. I would start, like I said, I would start with the software online, looking up interactions and go to the physician and or the pharmacist with that list. So you're already armed with some knowledge and information to help.
Is there anything that you want your potential new clients to prepare themselves with before they walk through the door to your office so you can better serve them?
I spend a lot of time preparing for my patients. So they usually send me, I like to get records ahead of time, at least most relevant things. And I ask a lot of questions when we're here. They'll usually send me some sort of brief summary beforehand. But I think being focused and having specific goals is a good way to approach a visit with a physician, and realistic expectations. I'll have patients who come to me, frankly, their expectations are just not realistic, and maybe they've abused their bodies for a long time or suffered with some condition that's gone undiagnosed or poorly managed by another doctor. And I'll say, look, we can be strict in our goal. Let's be flexible how we get there. Let's do this the right way. Again, in this day and age, everybody wants like a quick answer, a quick solution, like we get on our phones. And that doesn't, long-term health just doesn't work that way.
When it comes to making adjustments for the results we want, do we always need to give ourselves like a 90-day window? What's realistic time changes for hormone changes, weight changes, improvements in our from removing endocrine disruptors from our lives?
Yeah, I think, arbitrarily 90 days is a good kind of rule of thumb. That's not to say some people won't feel better. And what I often tell my patients is, look, you're getting better inside from day one. It's just what metric are we going to use to assess that? Is it the number on the scale? Is it how you're sleeping? Is it how you feel and look about yourself? But rest assured, once we start making changes, positive things are happening already.
Where can people reach out to you, connect with you, work with you, and continue to learn from you?
Yeah, well, the best way is just to reach out to our website, which is jordangeller.com. All the information in there about our practice. And, I see patients here in Los Angeles. I have a limited practice because I'm just busy, thank God, which is a nice thing. But if we can help somebody, we will. And if not, we'll try to help direct them in the right way. And certainly for your East Coast listeners, I see patients through telemedicine on a secure Zoom platform in New York and in Florida.
Fantastic. And can you leave our listeners with maybe one last healthy tip they can consider adding into their life?
The best tip I would say would be what we said earlier is deal with your shit or shit's going to deal with you. Do
Yeah.
not kick the can down the road. It only gets harder to make healthier changes. And the toxins are accumulating, the stress is accumulating, our habits accumulate. And the sooner we can address it, the better.
Thank you. I'm going to repeat that one as loud as possible because I think that is, the nail on the coffin is you just have to start addressing things now as uncomfortable as it may feel.
Yeah, absolutely. And, baby steps. It's okay. It doesn't have to be fixed in a day.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Geller. I really appreciate you coming on.
Hey, you're welcome. It was great to talk to you. Have a great afternoon.